Hello, everyone. This is Debra Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Need training? Visit the Vendor Process Training Center to enroll in your choice of weekly live and on-demand training sessions. Plus, get access to vendor setup form templates and reference tools that will help you and your team avoid fraud, fines, and bad vendor data. So sign up for a free account to get access to free training sessions, vendor process FAQs, and a resource library with information you need to manage your vendor master file. Visit training.debrarrichardson.com today. The link will be in the show notes. Is your company a small or medium-sized business? If it is, do not get comfortable about fraud. You're being targeted too. Troy Baker is back to talk fraud and how the fraud prevention resources at the Better Business Bureau can help you protect your payments from fraudsters. Keep listening. Welcome to episode 340, part 2 with Troy Baker of the Better Business Bureau. Is your company an SMB? You're at risk for fraud, and the Better Business Bureau's resources can help. So, as is in the title, this podcast is really a continued conversation that I had with Troy Baker. We started talking about small and medium sized businesses. And because again, that's where we met. It was at a conference celebrating Michigan small businesses. And so I had a session on fraud. He came into my session, and after the session, he came up and gave me his card and said he wanted to be on the podcast. So I jumped all over that. But if you haven't listened to the first part podcast, which is episode 339, just before this one, go ahead and take a listen to that one. It'll give you some background on Troy, and then also talk about some of the fraud prevention resources that and processes, right, that we don't get to talk about in this one, because we really focused on, right, small businesses and some reasons why they're being targeted and why they may think they are not targets. So make sure you listen to that. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Troy Baker on small and medium-sized businesses and fraud. All right, so Troy, let's go ahead and get started with like question one. Small businesses or small, medium-sized businesses. So how are they really defined by the Better Business Bureau? Is it by size? Is it by dollar? Size of or number of employees? Amount of revenue? How does the Better Business Bureau define small, medium-sized businesses?
Yeah, when we talk to businesses, we look at number of employees as kind of the differentiator on business size. So every group uses a different kind of threshold where small ends. You know, some say it's 10, some say it's 50. I would say that the vast majority of businesses that we work with, though, are under about 25 employees.
All right, so under about 25 employees. So, all right, that's a great place to define, or a great way to define small, medium-sized businesses. And I will tell you, so again, we met at the, you were in my session for I was talking about fraud, and it was at a small business conference right in Michigan. And I didn't have as many folks as I wanted to have in the room because you know, and I know, right, that small businesses are targets for fraudsters, even though they may not think so. And so I took a look at the FBI IC3 report results, and what that is the FBI's Internet Complaint Center will take in all of these reports on fraud throughout the year, and then the FBI will put that into a report. And they just came out right with 2024, I think less than a month ago. But what's disturbing is that, again, a lot of small businesses think that, they're too small to be targeted by fraudsters, but business email compromise where fraudsters will send a request to make a change to a vendor's remittance information, either bank account for ACH or wire payment or remittance address for check payments. According to the FBI, for 2024, the average business email compromise fraud amount that loss is $131,000. We always hear about the millions, but it's lower than that. And if the average is 131,000, that means that they're seeing loss amounts that are less than that. And so one of the slides I had in my presentation in that session was how much can you lose? And so I asked the attendees, and then I revealed that 1 in 5 SMBs with a $10,000 loss will shut their doors and that was according to a Viking Cloud report that I found. And so it affects all size businesses, and I know you've seen it, right, Troy?
Oh, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. If you think about a small business, $131,000, I don't know a lot of small businesses that'll be able to withstand that. That is just far too large for most businesses to overcome. The
Yeah.
margins just aren't there. So yeah, $10,000. It sounds like the right number to me. And yeah, the biggest thing for businesses when you talk about it is they say, well, it's so expensive to do all of the things that you need to do, and it certainly can be expensive to do absolutely everything, but that doesn't mean you should do nothing. Every business needs to first get a handle on what their risk is, and then do what you can. We've talked before. Just make it harder. Just make it harder for the scammers to attack you.
Right.
One guy I talked to in the cybersecurity space always uses the example of, a criminal going down the street and look at houses. Are they going to rob the mansion that's really nice, but they've got giant walls and security cameras and snipers on the roof? Or are they going to rob the smaller house that doesn't have as much nice stuff, but the door's wide open and nobody's there?
Right.
You're going to
Right.
take the easy stuff, and it might not be as shiny, but it's easier to get at. So,
And if
for
yeah.
most small businesses, you just need to you just need to lock the front door to start with.
Right. Right. And if you think about it, right, not only is the 131,000 or maybe even the 10,000, if you think about just sending one email and you get 10 grand, that's a great expense of someone's time, or a great way to for a fraudster to spend their time, because it didn't take any time, right, to send that email. And it's not just the amount of the actual loss for that one fraudulent payment. It could be double, because now you have a vendor that hasn't been paid, and you may still need the product for whatever it is that you may be selling, or right. So So it's not just the one payment. It could be double the loss because now you still have to, pay that vendor. And so, yeah, it's just, it's something that small businesses really cannot ignore. And so I know I talked about check fraud, and that's like one of the latest trends, because the fraudsters are right, stealing the checks out of the mailbox. It's just getting very bad out here. But when we talk about, right, stopping the emails from getting through in the first place, so you could avoid, right, that fraudulent business email compromise scam that's coming. Um, Larger companies have IT teams, and right, so they've got the gate and the security cameras of the mansion, right? But what advice do you give to small businesses that don't have, a large person IT staff, and we know that they have to do something, right, to put obstacles and not make it easy for a fraudster? What advice do you have to them?
Yeah, the biggest thing is you need to train your staff on what to watch for and what to avoid. It's not complicated. It really is. I teach students what to look for in fake emails. It's a simple process. And honestly, it's 4 steps with every email you get. Does it make sense I'm getting this email? I get emails saying there's a problem in my Chase bank account. I don't have a Chase bank account. I know that's going to be a fake email, right? Um,
Yeah.
so ask yourself, does it make sense I'm getting this email? You look at the email address at the top, not the name attached to it because that can be fake, but the actual email address. Is that really theirs? And you got to look close because they can make it look very good. Maybe a one instead of an I. Maybe they tweaked something small. So you really got to look at it, but make sure it's really is that email. If there are links in there, hover your cursor over the links down the bottom corner of your browser. Little pop-up will come up and show you what website that link will take you to. It should be taking you to a secure website, so it should be HTTPS for secure, and it should be the right website. So if it says it's an email from Amazon, it should be taking you to an Amazon.com website, right? Making sure that the email or the link that it's sending you is the right place, and then does the context to the actual offer, the deal, whatever's in that, make sense to you? Is that something you would normally do? And is that the process you would normally follow? And it doesn't take a long time to really evaluate that offer, but knowing what that is and how to step through that with every email, you can do it in just a couple seconds, but that's really gonna clear out 90+% of those scams that come through and help you spot what's real and what's fake. So really being able to teach your staff, and if you're not the teacher, if you're not somebody that can do that, you need to find somebody that can, somebody like you, Deborah, who can, really walk people through this is what you need to know. And there are lots of services and organizations out there, and you need to find what is right for your company and the right fit for your company. Um, all with the goal of making it harder for scammers and better educating and protecting your company and your staff.
Yeah, and you absolutely have to do that. Reports have shown that anywhere from 15 to 22% of fraudulent emails actually do get through, right? The IT teams, if you have those, or you're using a third party company, right, to make sure that they put the email filters or whatever they do to try to catch those fraudulent emails. And I guess it's good that, anywhere between 78% and 85% are being caught, but you still have to find a way to deal with those 15 to 22%. And so, training, so that, you can stop, because you've got lazy fraudsters out there, right? They're just going to try to send things. They have spelling mistakes. They have, the context is not right. They've got, spoofed emails that if you really do take a look and apply, right, those 4 things, you can eliminate a large percentage of them just by knowing what to look for. So I love that, you talked about education. And so let's talk about, though, some of the common advice that's given and why they don't always prevent payment fraud. And one of the things I like to say is that with accounts payable teams, right, we are always getting either the vendor supporting documentation to add or update a vendor, which we absolutely need for legitimate vendors because we have to collect their information. And then for invoicing, right, a lot of times that's especially for small businesses, the only way they get it is through email. For both the invoices and the vendor supporting documentation. So saying, right, that, cybersecurity awareness training, one of the big things is, hey, if you weren't expecting it, don't, click on that attachment. Don't download, whatever is on, is in that email. And a lot of times, right, these team members weren't expecting it. They didn't know it was coming. And so sometimes the cybersecurity awareness training for the, for the accounts payable or vendor teams, is not enough. They still need it, but it's just not enough because of the nature of their work. They need those things that are coming through on what could be risky email. And so that's kind of the stuff, right, Troy, that I included in my presentation that day to small businesses. Some other things that they can include, that if they didn't notice it was a fraudulent email, some other things that they can put into place in order to catch it.
Absolutely. And it really is, as we've talked about, it varies by business and what your internal processes are, but you have to have a process. You have to think through what is our process going to be, and you have to live by it. It has to be written in stone. Um, the biggest risk to your business is your people. We are all human. We all make mistakes. And the biggest weakness is going to be a human trying to do something, trying to help somebody, maybe taking a shortcut to do it.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes wrong. Every time I talk to a business leader that gets hit with a spear phishing attempt and loses their paycheck, and for those that don't know, spear phishing, it's, phishing emails are those broad ones. Think of the old Nigerian print scams, right? They send it out to everybody. They hope they catch people. Spear phishing takes a little more specific information, usually about a business leader, and targets that person specifically using the information that they've been able to glean basically online through your Facebook page, business profiles, all of that stuff. So when I talk to somebody, usually it is because they were impersonated. The information was sent to the HR person or the payroll person and said, something emergency has happened. I need some data changed. And the person wants to be helpful. They want to help solve the problem. And by doing so, the scammers get a hold of the CEO's paycheck. Or in the case of Grand Rapids Public Schools about a year ago, all of the payments that were supposed to go to insurance for all of the teachers in the district, that payment for all of their insurance went to a bank account in California instead of to the insurance company.
Wow.
And all because an employee thought they were doing something right. They thought they were being helpful. They thought they were solving a problem, but they didn't follow the policy, or they didn't have a policy to follow. And if they didn't have a policy, I'm going to be blunt. That's on you as a business leader. You failed. You're responsible for that money going away and not your employee. I'll just be blunt about it. Business leaders are responsible for making sure they've got the right policies in place to protect their company and their employees. The CEO, I talked to one in Battle Creek whose paycheck was diverted. And her answer to me was, I'm glad it was me and not my employees. I can wait a couple weeks and get this money worked out. A lot of my employees can't afford that. They're paycheck to paycheck. And if
Oh,
you think about
yeah.
that for your organization, if you're the business leader and you didn't put the procedures in place to protect that, you kind of helped cause that problem. So you need to make sure you're helping protect everybody.
Yeah, and let me just say I love that leader. So that was good. And I again back to making sure that you have a process in place and that it's being followed. Because again, there's no silver bullet. So and make sure that even if you have a step in place that is there to prevent fraud, that you have some details surrounding it. So we've all heard of the confirmation call, right? If you have insurance, they may require that you place that confirmation call. If you have a board, they may require you, right, to place that confirmation call, but you still need some structure behind it. You still need some instruction behind it because you never know if you're not doing that call yourself, you never know what your direct reports are doing or other employees, because there have been times where a confirmation call was made and a fraudulent payment still happened. And that's because, may be using the information from the email. Maybe they are really not doing the confirmation call correctly. So, having a script in place, having some instructions of where to get contact information, especially if you don't already have it, some reputable places, right, that you can go and get contact information in order to make that confirmation call can be critical. And so making sure, again, that you have a documented process, that everyone's following it. And within that documented process, you have instructions for how to do, right, that thing, like the confirmation call. And so, all right. So let's share some advice that can be implemented at the user level. That's usually where I am because I know that when, folks come to my content, they're trying to figure out what they can do or what their team can do to handle, right, those fraudulent emails that are, going to get through. And so a lot of stuff I talk about is, again, at the user level, that's like with password managers, right? To make sure that, you don't have the same login information across multiple platforms, so they can't get into your email address. So let's talk about things like that can be implemented at the user level.
Yeah, I think your first one there with password managers is spot on.
Yeah,
They help you create really complex passwords that are different for everything. I love my dad, but he had a system. He's retired now, but when he actually worked in computers for a long time, and his logins, he had to change his password regularly. But it was
yeah,
Detroit Lions 01 for January, Detroit Lions 02 for February, Detroit Lions 03 for March. You don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out if you find Detroit Lions 01 and 02, you're going to try 03, 04, 05, 06 until you find one that works. So the scammers aren't stupid. They're going to figure
yeah,
that out. Password managers are a great way to make sure your passwords are complex and different. And there's a really interesting chart out there that I saw as we went through our own internal systems at the Better Business Bureau that showed how hard it is to crack passwords based off of the more characters you add, the more different options of characters. So if you add numbers, it makes it significantly harder. Upper, lower, special characters.
yeah.
The more you add into that, the longer it takes for somebody to crack that. And it goes from, seconds to thousands of years trying to get at it. So the more you can do, the more complex it can be, the better secure you're going to be. And those password managers can absolutely make that worthwhile.
Yeah, and I love that. And I remember being just like your dad back in the day because we had, an interim that we had to change those passwords. And so, yes, we would just change it, the quarter and the month, using that same word. So I love password managers because we all have a lot of passwords that we have to remember. And before password managers, it was just easier to use the same one across multiple sites. But now, if a fraudster gets a hold of one, they can get into like multiple platforms, maybe even email addresses, like we see they're doing today. So, password managers, I think, are one big step that small businesses can take for their employees to make sure that they're not being their user credentials to sign on to one thing are not being used to compromise something else. All right. So with that, we know fraudsters, last question here, right? They're always evolving and certainly, recommendations to avoid fraud, will always change and expand because again, they're always evolving. So what do you think is the most important step a small business can take to protect their company from external fraud?
Yeah, we talked about having the processes in place. I think the biggest thing for businesses is you always have to be learning. Scammers are always adapting. Just because there are scams that have been around forever and they will just be around forever.
Right.
But they're always working to adapt and get in. So make sure that you are a lifelong learner when it comes to this. That means you have to stay abreast of what's going on. Our educational foundation tries to help share that information out. People like you try to share this information out and warn people what's happening right now in the business community so that they can avoid becoming a victim of this. So you need to take advantage of those resources that are there and learn about that. And you don't have to do it alone. There are a number of organizations out there that can help you. There's often a cost to some of those. This is not a free process. But if you think about that $10,000 thing, the $131,000, can your company survive that? No. Then you might have to spend a couple $1,000s to make sure that you've got the right security in place, the right systems and processes in place to protect your business long term.
There is a podcast episode we talked about or we did before that really talks about frauds and the validations you can do to make sure, right, that your vendors are real, especially when you're getting those fraudulent emails in. And so I will definitely link to that and identify the podcast episode. So I really like the fact that you talked about keeping up to date with the latest fraud trends. So Troy, thanks again for coming on, and we're going to have some links, right, to some resources in the show notes for from the Better Business Bureau.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yep. All right, so I hope you enjoyed part two of my conversation with Troy Baker. And again, do not forget to go back if you haven't listened to it already and listen to really part one, which was episode 339. And don't forget, I still have all of those links we mentioned for the BBB scam resources in the show notes. So thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 340th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.